Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another quick little tidbit. Judy Vorndran and I, or also known as Boss Lady, as you may know from the podcast series. And if you're not watching those podcasts, please do check them out on saltovation.com. But anyway, we were just talking about a client issue that related to Chicago. And as some of you may or may not be aware, Chicago has this interesting personal property lease transaction tax, the PPLTT, that does reach certain cloud services like SaaS. And we had a client who we were evaluating Nexus for, and this Chicago information bulletin came up in conversation. It was issued in January of this year. That addresses the Wayfair threshold for Chicago purposes. Now, I think, just to kind of reiterate, we commend Chicago for issuing this. It's nice to actually have a local jurisdiction give clear guidance on something like this. Most locals are not known to take a proactive step like this. But it's interesting because while it's guidance, the way that they phrase their safe harbor is actually in the negative, and that's, I think, the point that is most interesting to me. So the information bulletin basically goes through the Wayfair threshold. It goes through the analysis of the case. It goes through the analysis of the Illinois law, which follows the standard, 100,000 of sales, 200 transactions, and then they discuss how state law has the ability to preempt their home rule authority, but does not in this case. So they feel free to kind of operate within, as far as they need to in creating a standard of their own. And they chose to do a 100,000 safe harbor. But again, the way that they word it is in the negative. So they say, if you are under $100,000 and they don't have a transactional threshold, they're only using the 100,000 of sales, then you're considered a small seller and you are within the safe harbor. And their enforcement date for the safe harbor is July 1st. But what I think this means, if you kind of read between the lines, is that if you're not a small seller, if you're not within a safe harbor and you're over the $100,000 threshold, then you default to the state's threshold, the state's enforcement date, which is back in October of 2018, if I remember correctly. So, and then it's going to be a case-by-case analysis. So I think that, I don't know if this is on purpose. I certainly don't want to accuse Chicago of anything here, but it seems like this might be a trap for the unwary. You have this July 1st effective date for the safe harbor, but if you were already above the safe harbor, it's possible that you might be held to a Wayfair standard dating back to 2018. So I don't know, Judy, if you have any comments on that. I think we just need to make our clients aware, and the general public aware that this July 1st enforcement date may not mean what at first seems to elude that it means.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Well, it's also interesting that they've even taken a Wayfair stance, at a city level. Now, mind you, they're really not a little city. There's 2.7 million people who live in the city of Chicago. So it is a pretty populous city. In fact, it's probably more populous than a few states in America. So you can appreciate the weight of their legal enforcement of tax laws, and that they have a tremendous amount of humans that they need to support with infrastructure and so forth. So they need the taxes. I also think the 100,000 is always an interesting thing, that you would consider that a small seller, because some companies could sell 100,000 one-time sale, and it would be the only sale they had into the jurisdiction. And then other people could be selling a lot of like hair ties, and that exceeds threshold because they have, the transaction count. But needless to say, 100,000, I would argue, is not a really de minimis amount of money, if you can get volume, if you can get recurring, and so on and so forth. So, but the fact that it could have a retroactive effect on your registration, I think is just what, like you said, it's a trap, but it's also what I think a lot of people misapprehend about registrations in general. They throw them out there, they fill them out, they get it done because they want to move forward. They don't want to look at the past. But then what happens is the government can look at the past. And so they know what day you started because you put that on your application, and the numbers on, then the date is on there. And so they know, like, if you didn't do it on time, then you're late. So it's hard to know what Chicago's going to do about retroactive enforcement. No one's ever a fan of that, but I've certainly seen it in my career where governments have come in and we thought we were fine and we had a statute of limitations argument, and that argument didn't hold up. And at some point, what happens is you kind of get extorted, right? Like, the money at stake is not enough to go to court. I mean, if you have something that's 50,000 or less in liability, you're not going to court, so you can be upset about it all you want.
It'll cost more to litigate. Yeah.
Cost more to litigate, or the time, of it. So I don't know. I don't know what the pulse is on that at the city level, if they're really going to do it. I mean, right now with COVID, thankfully, everybody's sort of been behind the 8 ball, but I think they should be glad they're getting new registrants, but that may not be the case.
Absolutely. And that's interesting because the way that they mention this in the information bulletin, I can read from here, is that they say that the states meeting the state's Wayfair threshold for non-safe harbor companies is only one of the elements that they're going to consider on a case-by-case basis for Nexus. So, then they talk about doing, evaluating the entity's employees or other agents and what their activity is, any kind of other physical presence, any directed advertising, basically, they're looking at the legal purposeful availment kind of activities. And then in combination of all those factors, they will evaluate whether they can go back to 2018. Now, obviously, physical presence by itself will put you back even further.
Correct.
But they're kind of lumping it all together into a case-by-case purposeful availment type of analysis. So I think what we're hearing is that the city has taken kind of a reasonable approach to wanting to earn prospective taxpayers, right? So we don't know yet how they're going to enforce this.
Right.
But the way that this is written seems like they can enforce it harshly.
Right.
Whether they will choose to or not is not clear. The ordinance, I believe, still reads as physical presence nexus. But we've heard of some cases where under audit, they've been enforcing economic nexus even before this information bulletin came out. So just kind of interesting anecdotes, I suppose.
Well, what I feel, even, I don't know, over the years, Wayfair was this thing, and a lot of people talk to us about Wayfair. And what we end up finding is they already had Nexus. They didn't even, it's not Wayfair that got them over the threshold. Wayfair is just what made them aware they needed to do something. But when we really talked to them, they already had Nexus, physical presence, inventory in the state, a remote worker coming in and training, popping in and out for sales calls. They already had physical presence nexus.
Yeah, or trade show activity or something. Yeah.
Economic nexus. So that, I think, is the real trap. And you're seeing that a lot with taxpayers. They want to just pretend like the past didn't exist, move forward, and basically fill out registration forms. But the thing is, that's a legal document signed under penalty of perjury, and a state can reference it. And we certainly are seeing that in the state of Maine, where they're going back and saying, why didn't you register back in 2018? So why, if Chicago, what's probably going to happen is Chicago will do it with a few. They'll set a couple examples. So you have to decide if you're willing to do a few, because they'll make a few people that are maybe going to spread the word a little bit more. I mean, it's what I've seen in enforcement. They'll pick a few key players and go after them specifically. Yeah. So it's hard to say, because governments can always enforce, right?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But anyway, we just wanted to make you all aware of this. I think we have a little more clarity on Nexus now. The next point of analysis for Chicago is sourcing. And that's a whole separate conversation unto itself. But, especially from a SaaS perspective, we encourage you to understand where your customers are actually using the software, because, if your records are based on bill to, that whole amount should not be sourced to Chicago.
Correct.
So,
and of course, people want to take the time and have to really understand that, but that's usually how you build out the product PO, because you're like, all right, how many users are you going to buy, or how many people want to use this product? Is this a nationally? We buy certain licenses for our entire firm, and not everybody sits in the same place. So we should be spreading that out amongst jurisdictions. Sure, we get billed one place, but where we're using. So it's everybody understands their business footprint. The software companies just don't always get that information.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks, Judy.
All right. Thanks, Alex,
Okay,
for setting
appreciate
this
it.
up. All
Yeah,
right.
you got it.
Bye.